Hi, this is going to be a video on the star Algol and basically who he is and what his characteristics are and what he does and what working with him will do for you, and basically his function as a high god or archangel. Yeah, essentially the star, it's known, traditionally it's known as a fixed star. Um, that's what they're called traditionally. Stars anyway. Um, Whereas planets used to be called wandering stars because they both used to be called stars. So a fixed star would be just a star. It's a star, right? Because it wasn't known back then that planets weren't stars, right? So yeah. Um, so that's why like the stars these days they're called fixed stars. If you look them up in like astrology or magic, um, if you're looking to gain information on them through those means, then they'll be known as fixed stars rather than just stars generally. Anyway, Algol is a star of judgment. Essentially, he's an archangel of judgment, and essentially his function is to judge people and to you know and to bring justice and and punishment in certain cases, right? Um, Essentially, throughout a lot of history, Algol has been considered an evil star, or one that through a lot of cultures anyway, because generally, if and this is based on his function in an astrological chart, essentially. It's that throughout, if you look, if you study astrology, then you'll understand that um, a person having Algol prominent in their charts, it's generally not a great omen. Um, so yeah, so people throughout history generally, when they were born with Algol um, prominent in their astrology chart, in a bad, especially in a bad placement, like conjunct the moon or sun or rising sign or something like that, they generally foretell that the person born with that placement would have not the best things happen to them, right? And may have bad luck in their life, right? And this is why previous cultures thought that Algol was evil. It's just because they're primitive and they didn't really, people back then, they didn't really understand, these concepts about higher levels of morality and, the function of high gods and, function of archangels and stuff like that. They didn't really understand those things. So they thought, this is a bad omen in astrology charts. So the star must be evil, right? It's kind of like a mouse, would think, the cat's evil, right? But the cat's just doing what it does, right? you know. Um, so yeah, um, essentially, Algol he tries to keep people accountable for their actions. Um, there's a story, a parable, about how a shepherd, he's tending his flock of sheep, right? And there's this one sheep that kept straying from the flock, right? And the shepherd, he kept trying to bring the sheep back, right? To say, hey, come back here, and like he'd run off and get the sheep and bring it back to the flock, right? But the sheep would keep straying, right, from the flock. And eventually, the shepherd, what it did, because the reality is, if the shepherd hadn't done something about it, then the sheep would have, wandered off, and it would have been eaten by a wolf or something, right? So what the shepherd did is the shepherd broke the sheep's leg, so that the sheep, um, wouldn't be able to wander off from the flock anymore, right? And it did this, not because the shepherd was evil or because the shepherd hated the sheep. It was just because he did it for the sheep's own good, right? So that the sheep would stop wandering off, and so that it would live and all that, right? And so that it could so that would be in danger anymore, right? Endangering itself like that. Um, so that parable, it has a lot of spiritual and philosophical significance, right? Because that's how God acts. That's how archangels act, essentially. And a lot of the high gods act like that too. Like um, they may do things that kind of may seem to an uninformed person, or a person who doesn't really understand concepts, or a person who may just you know due to their circumstances lack the objectivity to understand what's happening. Um, they'll think, like the previous, like the ancient cultures I talked about, the majority of people, how they thought, Algol was evil, an evil star, right? Because it was a bad omen in astrology charts of people, right? Um, but the reality is that Algol, is a star or archangel, whatever you want to call it. I think it's both. It's obviously a star, but I think the main stars, the 15 Bohemian stars, which means root, the 15 root stars, they're used in primarily in astrological magic. Are I think they're archangels, and there are several of those stars actually that correspond to archangels, that have been corresponded to archangels through for hundreds and hundreds of years now. Yeah. So, and the archangels in general, they correspond to planets as well. Like for instance, Gabriel, the messenger of God, he corresponds to the moon in a lot of in pretty much all magical traditions. And Michael corresponds to the star Aldebaran, and also to the star our sun. Yeah. So there's traditionally been a pretty strong correspondence that's believed among a lot of spiritual circles, that the stars and archangels, they're basically one and the same, or pretty close to each other anyway, um, in terms of their powers and their level of consciousness and their function, essentially in the world. Anyway, um, so yeah, like the primitive cultures, they thought he was bad because he was a bad omen, right? But the reality is that Algol, he was like, he's like the shepherd that I talked about in, that parable, right? Where the shepherd, broke the sheep's legs so he could save it, right? So that it wouldn't stray anymore, and so it would get eaten by a wolf or a predator, right? Because, there would have been only so many times that the sheep would have been able to stray, right? And then eventually, the shepherd may have, been busy with something else, right? And then by the time he got to the sheep, it would have been too late, maybe be eaten by a wolf or a predator or something, right? So it just the shepherd, it seemed cruel, maybe at first glance, for it to break its leg like that, but it had to, just because he had to stop it from harming itself, right? And that's how it is with like the high gods and archangels for the most part, right? Some of them have effects and functions, in the world, that would seem more benevolent than others do. Yeah, you know. But the reality is, even the ones that seem harsher, you know, at first glance, they're carrying out a function, and they're carrying, that's essentially uh, a decent way you can look at them as archangels and stars, is that they're a function, kind of. They're in service of God, right? They're in service of the universe, of whatever you want to call it, right? They're in service of like the hierarchy of gods and all that, and top down, all that pyramid stuff. Anyway, they're basically, they each serve functions, and they each have designations or jobs, right? Some of them are judges. Some of them they pass judgment. Some of them bring blessings. Some of them bring protection. Some of them punish. Some of them reward. Some of them do both, right? So it depends on their which one you're specifically talking about, what they do, but they're all basically doing good, and they're all basically trying to help people. Most of them, anyway. There are some you know entities out there that are that have a level of power comparable to a star or an archangel, that are pretty dark, right? And but the 15 fixed stars are used in like magic generally. Those ones, I'd say they're pretty benevolent for the most part. They're and pretty refined in terms of their consciousness. They're not they're not like the highest god in terms of their consciousness or their evolution or their benevolence, but it's hard for any entity to live up to that, right? Um, but they live up to it more than most any other entity in existence, or so. They're not doing that bad, right? Um, Even though they're not quite as perfect as God is, right? But yeah, so, and essentially they're basically his. It's believed that those archangels and stars are basically his. Well, it's believed anyway that the archangels are God's hand, right? Are the hands of God. That they basically, God has them act to do his will, right? And the stars are basically the same. God, like I said, I think they're archangels, and God basically tells them, okay, do this, do that, and blah blah blah, carry out this function. You're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. And he basically gives them their orders and stuff like that, right? And gives them the function and the jobs and the you know and the areas of responsibility that they govern respectively, right? Each of them. So yeah. Regarding Algol, like I said, Algol he's an archangel of judgment, essentially, and he passes judgment on people, and that's why throughout history, Algol was considered a bad or considered evil, because Algol generally in astrological charts he represented bad omens for the person's life, right? But the reality is that those people, they are primitive and they didn't really understand the complexities of spirituality or morality, right? So they didn't understand that maybe this person, right, who has Algol prominent in their charts, and they have unlucky circumstances that happen to them in their lives. Maybe that person did bad things in a past life, right? And in that case, it makes more sense, because then, well, the person that did something bad in a past life that was really bad, right? And then this one, they have Algol maybe conjunct their moon or something like that, and then something bad happens to them. And so with that being said, you realize then that kind of, that punishment, or that, yeah, it's a punishment, that it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily undeserved, right? It was just, it was more so, and it wasn't necessarily coming from a place of, um, you know, um, disdain or anything like that on the part of the star, the archangel Algol, that caused it to happen, um, or that who signified it as an omen, right? Um, it wasn't because that entity disdained the person. It's just because the entity Algol was trying to teach the person a lesson, so the person could grow and evolve, right, and be a better person, and make better choices, and that way, if the karma, you know, unfortunate things happening to the person, it just kind of, it allowed the person to learn a lesson, so that the person hopefully would do better, and not make the same bad decision like he did previously in that previous life, right? So it's a complicated matter, karma and all that stuff. It's just it's pretty complicated, even for like a person who's really wise and intelligent. It's complicated, because karma, it's something that only like a high god or archangel or God himself would really understand fully, So like it said, God works in mysterious ways, and archangels do too, to an extent, right? So it's like because archangels are basically his right hands, so it's complex, and you know the reality is, think of it this way, like within the example that I talked about, how a person in their past life, maybe they did bad things, and then in this life now they have Algol conjunct their moon, which is a bad omen generally, right? And then bad things happen to them, right? And you think, you know from some people's point of view, if they don't understand, like they'll think, oh, that star's evil. But the reality is, look at it this way. Maybe, that bad thing happens to the person in this life for what happened and what the person did in their last life. And then because of that bad thing happening in this life, for the rest of their life in this life or in their next life, they become better people as a result of experiencing that, right? That was a result of experiencing that judgment or that punishment, right? That was caused by Algol, or signified by him as an omen, right? Um, it's hard to say whether he causes things or not, or whether he signifies things as an omen. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's something else as well. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's perhaps a combination of people and other entities and stuff like that, just kind of come together to kind of fucking weave a fabric of destiny, or I don't know if destiny is the right word for it, or weave a fabric of events happening, I guess, a fabric of time, you know, um, a continuum of time, right? A timeline, I guess, events, right? Something like that. It's hard to explain some of these things. Like it's pretty advanced. Um, but anyway, um, yeah. So like in the example I was talking about, the person doing something bad in their past life, and then in this life they have the moon conjunct Algol, which is a bad omen. And then something bad happens to them in this life. Well, a person who doesn't understand this stuff may think, oh, the star's evil, right? But then the reality is, if that person hadn't been punished in this life, then the person may not be as good a person in the next life, right? Or may not be as good a person for the rest of this life, right? So really, that punishment may have actually like helped the person a lot, you know. So that's the reality of things, is that sometimes penalties are good, because well, penalties are, they can definitely be good a lot of times, as long as they're just, right? Because it allows the person to learn a lesson, to become a better person, hopefully, right? And so essentially, that's what Algol does. He wants to try to help people become better people. So he's a god of judgment, or an archangel of judgment, and he basically passes judgment on people through their actions, and their character, right? And when he sees flaws and when he sees mistakes that are made, then he generally rectifies them, and he'll punish for that, in some cases, and that's basically his function. As far as being evil, I've worked with him for several years now, and I don't consider him evil. Like, he's pretty chill. Like, he's straight up. He's pretty honest. I've talked to him, channeled him, invoked him, and stuff like that for years now. I've used his talismans for years now, and I find that he's pretty, he's a pretty good guy. I find, he's a bit detached at first. He kind of aloof, maybe, I guess you could call him. But archangels in general are like that. They're kind of archangels, or high gods. They have a very impersonal or detached energy to them. They love people, and they love living beings. Actually, they love living beings. They have, that's a feature of them, is that they have this universal love or compassion, towards all living beings, and respect for that, for life, in general. Um, but it's a detached love. It's not a personal love. It's not a romantic love. It's more of a detached love, where it's spread across a multitude of entities, right? You know, so it's not something that's so to a person, it could be off-putting at first, because it's like it's more abstract, and more impersonal than relationships that maybe they typically used to, right? So, but yeah, I don't think he's bad or evil or anything like that. Um, um, and the reason why he's been called evil by some cultures is because, like I said, he as an omen, he signified bad things in a person's chart, right? But yeah, anyway, um, yeah, that's basically about what his function is and what he does, and his role in the universe and what he governs and all that. He's a his nature is I guess his nature would be a combination of mostly a combination of Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, the Sun, somewhere around there. Yeah, maybe a bit of Venus as well. Um, um, but because the stars, I talked about this in another video, which I'm going to redo. But the stars are essentially they're more complex than the planets are. You know, just as our sun has more complex significations to it than any of the planets in our solar system does. The stars are more complex than any singular planet that we have. So if you're thinking about fixed stars or the stars and what the significations that they have are, what their archetypes are, what their personalities are, then to think of it just as a planet in terms of that level of complexity, it's you're not going to get the full picture because stars are the parents of the planets. Stars are of a higher level of hierarchy than any of the planets are. The planets are gods, but they're they're normal gods. The stars and the archangels are high gods, and then there's God up here who's like the highest god, right? So that's basically how the hierarchies work. Like it's the stars are more complex than any of the planets. So to try to quantify them or define them in the way that you would the planets, it's not really with the same basically level of complexity. It's not going to give you really the full picture because they're complicated, and it takes a while to get to know them and to know their significations. Than it is the planets. The planets are a lot more basic, you could say. Yeah. Yeah. Just a moment. I took notes on this one. Yeah, essentially, like Algol, he tries to help people evolve, and he does this through judging them by punishing them sometimes, right? And these lessons, they help the person become better people, right? Over the course of several lifetimes generally, and it generally happens over the course of multiple lifetimes that this evolution takes place. But sometimes the bad events that he can signify, it can cause people to evolve more and become better people in this life as well. So it's something that's it's a broad spectrum. It's a broad it's the evolution of a person's soul, a person's consciousness, right? Their evolution is a living entity, right? It's something that happens over a large amount of time. Generally, it's believed, a lot of cultures believe in reincarnation. And that's why I believe so. I think it's over multiple lifetimes. Generally, that person evolves, but some people, they can evolve in one lifetime too, a fair bit too, right? It just depends on the circumstances of the person, right? So essentially, yeah, Algol, he tries to help people evolve and become better people. He's been called in some cultures the demon's head. What this kind of indicates is that, in my view, is that he basically has command over most all demons, and basically he, in terms of his hierarchical level of power, basically even from what I understand, from what I've been told by him, is that even like most of the higher level demons, like the highest level demons, wouldn't want to fuck with him because he's just so powerful that he's a god. He's God's like basically right hand archangel of judgment. So he'll like he basically has command over most any demonic entity in existence if he wants to. So and really that's level of authority, it's not exclusive to him among archangels. Oh, there are a lot of archangels actually that have command over like the vast majority of demons. Quite a few of them do. They some of them use that command more than others. Some of them use it less than others, but the majority of them have, or there are quite a few that have command over at least the vast majority of demons if they wanted to. It's just some of the stars or archangels, they basically use that command more than others, to get whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish done, because it's basically, it's like it said, God works through people and stuff like that. Archangels work through people. Archangels work through various entities, right? Lower angels, demons, whatever, elementals, whatever, spirits, things, energetic entities, that basically, to get whatever it is they want done, that's how it is with God too. He'll work through all kinds of entities just to, to get his will done, right? It depends on the specific circumstance and the situation in which forces, which entities are going to be best utilized for the purpose at hand, right? It's kind of like a person, who's the CEO of a company. Well, he's going to have, postmen. He's going to have people in the mailroom. He's going to have secretaries, receptionists. He's going to have, um, executives. He's going to have a vice president. He's going to have, managers. He's going to have, think of a company like, what's the biggest company? One of the bigger companies in the world, maybe Microsoft, Google, stuff like that, right? They're going to have a lot of different people under them, with a lot of different roles, right? And if you think about that, Google or Microsoft, all the people that they have under them, all the different functions, all the different roles, right? That's that's a lot of different assignments. That's a lot of different people. That's a lot of different entities with different abilities and different characteristics, right? That the CEO of the company has, command that are under him, right? To do the objectives of the company, right? And it sounds really complicated in that example, but think about it now with like God and archangels and all that stuff, right? And it's like it becomes like a level of complexity that's like a billion times the amount of that, right? Even the biggest companies in the world, the level of complexity with God and angels and spiritual hierarchies, right? It goes to the nth degree beyond that. It makes the biggest company in the world look as simple as you know a store, a mom and pop store ran by a mom and pop, right? it, it makes the biggest company in the world look even less complex than that, right? So it just it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of different entities and forces involved, and beings, right? There's a lot of different for instance, on this planet alone, there are like 8 billion people, right? Or 7 billion people, right? And there, God knows how many animals and insects and fish and other living entities on this planet, and spirits, I guess, and gods and that stuff, right? So and spiritual entities, right? So it's a lot of, this world has a lot of different beings on it, a lot of different living beings, right? A lot. Like, probably in the trillions, I guess, I imagine, So like, or at the very least I'd say in the trillions, probably, all the insects, all the single, you um, all the less complex organisms, the fish, the water animals, the dry land animals, the reptiles, all that stuff, the birds, right? It's a lot of, there's definitely a lot of life on this planet, right? So with that being said, you know, um, that's just this planet, right? Our universe is vast. Our galaxy is vast. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and there are other galaxies, right? There are hundreds of billions of stars alone in this galaxy, and there are other galaxies out there. So the universe is like gigantic. There's so many different entities out there. It's not even funny. Like if you think that this is the only planet that has life, then I have some oceanfront property that you'd love. But but yeah. Anyway, like there's a lot of different entities in this universe, right? So like it's a complex structure and hierarchy of command and authority and responsibility among those entities, right? And there's a top-down structure to it generally, Yeah, that's basically how the archangels and God works and all that stuff, kind of in a simplified way. Trying to explain it in a way that's doesn't add more confusion to things, but at least gives you kind of mental models that allow you to kind of conceptualize it better and hopefully understand it better. Um, but yeah, like I said earlier, Algol is an archangel of judgment. So he passes judgment on people. He judges their actions and their behavior and who they are as people, and he passes judgment on them, all that. So essentially, Algol, beyond being just an archangel of judgment, he's also used in magical traditions, and he's been used for probably around like 1500 years at least, among various magical traditions. One of which was practiced by the Arabians, and I believe personally that uh, the the three wise men that found Jesus, they were that they used these stars and that they worked with these planets in a magical way, beyond just being astrologers. I believe that personally, because they came from Middle Eastern origins. The wise men, it's believed. And I think it's a lot of the star and planetary part of it, definitely part of the tradition for sure. It comes from the Arabs, so and it would have been around at that time. Um, so yeah, I'd say intuitively I'm pretty sure that they use the stars and the planets in their magical rituals, and made use talismans and stuff like that, or invoke them at least, and developed a relationship with them anyway, in their magical work, right? Um, that's my belief anyway. But anyway, the stars used in magic, it goes back, quite a ways uh, to various civilizations that have used them. Um, Basically, a lot of the major ones have used them in magic and spirituality practices. All the major ones basically have, you know, throughout the past few thousand years. Anyway, um, but yeah, so essentially, alcohol has been used in magic, and the people who practice it, they develop a relationship with them, right? And in doing so, it gets the person certain benefits who works with them, and develops a good relationship with them, just as it does like with other stars or archangels, right? And like the thing is with these stars and archangels, right? They want the person to be a good person, you know, that they work with, right? There's some demons out there though, and not even all of them will do this, but like there's some of them, they're basically work with a person. The person, could do pretty fucked up shit, and like the demons will still fucking help them out or bail them out of the crappy situations, right? And like I said, that's some demons. Some of them, those are like, fuck you, we're not fucking supporting you anymore, man. Like, we're gonna walk away from you, buddy. And that's how it is. Fucking, like, it's not even all demons there like that bad. Fucking some of them must be like, fuck you. You're not. You're not being a moral person. You're not making the right choices, and we don't like that, so we're not gonna support you anymore. And that's how it'll work with some of them, right? But some of them, they'll support the person anyway, even if they're doing crappy shit, right? But archangels and stars, what they'll do is they'll support the person, but they want the person to be a good person too, because basically, if a magic user person works with them, they're representing them to an extent, right? So they want, and moreover than that, really the stars and the archangels, they're impersonal. They don't have these petty feelings that we do, or if they do, it's been refined and controlled over so much time that it's barely even present in them, anymore. They've evolved beyond it. They've evolved essentially, archangels and stars, beyond the petty feelings that we as humans have. Insecurity, jealousy, anger, hate, disdain. Those kind of things that are present in all of us, right? To varying extents and various proportions among different people, because some of them have more of them than others do, right? But yeah, like it's they basically evolved beyond those kind of feelings, so they it's not really so much personal with them. It's more so It's more so just, they want people to be better. They want people to be their best selves. So they're not necessarily going to support a person who's doing bad things, right? Is a bad person, is making bad choices and all that stuff, right? So essentially, if you want to work with archangels and high gods, then it's important that you strive to be a good person. You strive to make the right choices, and you strive to put your best foot forward in life, and to do good, right? And sometimes, and that means that there's a certain responsibility to it, right? It's important that that you um, that you maintain, right? That you live up to, right? And so yeah, like essentially working with them, they will help you out, and they will make your life better and all that. But you have to do legwork too. They're not going to do everything for you, because like I said in another video, but essentially if spiritual entities did all the legwork for a person, then the person uh, wouldn't learn anything, right? So, and that's the whole point of this whole experience of being incarnated down here, is that we're supposed to learn things, and we're supposed to evolve, right? We're supposed to become better people, right? And fix our weaknesses, and better utilize our strengths, right? And grow in terms of character and all that, right? Consciousness and stuff like that, right? And if gods and archangels and all that did all the legwork for people, then it would just kind of there'd be no point in them sending us down here, right? But they will help you. They will help you in your life, and if you develop relationships with them, then they'll then they can give you a hand in things, right? So essentially, what does Algol do as if you work with them? Well, first off, if you want to work with them, then probably the best way to do it would be to create a talisman, for him, and this would be at a specific time when he's powerful in the sky. And this is according to, like, in order to create a talisman that's effective for him, you'd have to create it according to like specific specifications based on astrological magic and traditional astrology, and that's pretty complicated for the majority of people. So with that being said, I'm going to be posting an electional chart video tonight on how on a specific time that you could create an Algol talisman for yourselves. And that's going to be on Monday morning. No, it's going to be on Tuesday morning at like 5 a.m. roughly. And I'll give the specific time actually when I create the video. But essentially it would be a time when you'll create a good Algol talisman. And to create it, I'll go into how to create it on the video. It's pretty simple. You just get a material, metal or a crystal, and some metals are better than others, and some crystals are better than others, or stone or something like that. If you're hurting, stone will work, just not as well as a crystal or metal. Then at the specific time, then you just engrave the star's character, the star's sigil or seal, onto the stone or metal or crystal, right? Or you can even print that out at the specific time, and you'll create a weaker talisman, but it'll still do something for you. You'll still start a connection with him, and offer you some benefit, right? And anyway, yeah, I'm going to post that video tonight on how to make a talisman of him, which will be around 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So if any of you watching this are interested in having an Algol talisman, working with him, then yeah, check that out, because I'll be posting that tonight. And yeah, but anyway, what does working with Algol get you, right? What does it do for you if you create a talisman of him and start a relationship with him? Well, essentially, one of his primary significations is that he offers protection. He'll protect you, essentially. Yeah. He'll protect your body. He'll protect your health. And he'll protect you from attacks from other people or other entities. And he'll protect you even against witchcraft, against spells and shit like that as well. He'll protect you from other entities or other beings or other people who may have negative intentions towards you, right? and that's basically what he does. He also, beyond that, protection is probably his primary significance that he's most known for as a talisman or as a person entity to work with, right? But beyond that, he'll also make a person more confident. He'll make a person more bold. He'll make a person stronger willed. He'll help you to be, and beyond that, he'll also help you to be more magnanimous. What does that mean? Well, magnanimous, essentially, it's a word that's not used that much these days. But essentially what it means is it makes the person less petty. You'll make the person, you'll make the person who works with him, less open to doing petty things, or things that, like jealousy or insecurity or things like that, or things that are, um, um, unwarranted, right? So it helps the person to, beyond, the protection, beyond helping the person become stronger and more confident, and beyond protecting the body and all that, and protecting from witchcraft, it make the person have better character as well, so that they'll be acting from a place of more authenticity, more less pettiness, and more basically, there are some actions that people commit that are small, and by small I mean not necessarily in the scope of their effect. Sometimes the effect that they have are pretty bad, but I mean small in terms of like it's petty, it's something that was motivated by feelings of motivated from a place of impurity, right, or immorality, right, and or lack of compassion, right, things like that, right. So like essentially Algol, he helps the person who works with him to do less of those things, than they did before, right. And he helps them to act from less of a petty place when they make decisions, and to try to, it helps the person to make better decisions, make more wise decisions, and to make decisions that are, more big. And by big, I mean, more, broad-minded, and more acting from more a place of compassion and understanding, and, all that stuff, right? Rather than a place of feelings that are kind of like impure, right? It allows a person to act from feelings of greater purity, the place of greater purity, right? Which is good. So he helps the person's character as well as offering protection. Um, anyway, that's a general overview of what he does and what working with him or using his talismans does. And basically a talisman, essentially, I'll explain this better in another video, but a talisman, essentially, it's a communication device between yourself and the astrological spirit that you're working with, or the archangel, or whatever it is you're working with, or entity. And it allows you to basically have a connection with it, and to communicate with it better, and to kind of, it provides a link between you and it. It's like kind of like, look at it this way. It's kind of like getting a person's phone number, right? Now there's a link between you two, right? Or getting a person's email, right? So you can communicate right now, right? It's kind of like that. It's like, a talisman's kind of like having an entity's phone number, so you can talk to it better, and so you can understand it better, and, build more of a relationship with it, so you can hang out with it more, and, make plans with it more and all that, right? Yeah, and also a talisman also as well, if it's made according to astrological magic, because there's talismans that are made among different traditions that have different parameters, associated with them, and different requirements. And so the ones I'm speaking about right now are astrological magic talismans, and those ones are created according to traditional astrology, and those ones are the talismans I'm talking about right now. And essentially, beyond being a communication device between you and the entity, it's also acts as kind of a second home for the entity as well. So the entity will basically, a part of it anyway, will reside inside that talisman. And part of it will reside in that talisman, and it'll basically emanate, from that talisman, waves, and that cause its effects. It causes changes in yourself, yourselves, the person, people working with them, and as well it'll cause changes in the world too, to some extent. But primarily these talismans, they work on changing yourself rather than external things, really. Uh, they work, primarily, for your own evolution, right? And more so than external. Um, and these things, they won't allow you to um, basically, as far as like influencing others go, these things, these talismans, they'll allow you to become a better version of yourself, so that you can be your best version more so, right? Rather than changing the way other people think or things like that. Like, there are demons that you can work with that'll do that. That'll help you like straight up like manipulate people. But the stars and the archangels and planets, they're more so, especially the stars and the archangels, they're more so about cha- changing yourself rather than from um, manipulation, because it's 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 more of a darker place, right? Manipulation, but so yeah. Um, so essentially, like, if a talisman, it says it makes you more influential, then basically it'll help you develop better character. It'll help you develop better moral compass, better understanding, better wisdom, right? And then those qualities, better expressed through yourself, will allow you to be more influential because you're a better version of yourself, right? That's basically how the stars and the archangels work. They're more so based on personal evolution rather than bending others to your will or things like that, right? Demons are more so specialized for those kind of things. But I think personally, like I said, I think the stars and the archangels are a lot better to work with, because they just, at the end of the day, you want to be a good person and all that, and you want to do what's right, and all that stuff. So if that's what you're into, then better working with those higher entities, right? They'll help you to do those things more readily, yeah. Anyway, there are a few more significations on Algol that I'll go into, and what the more specific effects of his talismans are, and developing a relationship with him has. Because basically, I talked about, his significations is when working with him as a talisman, and when working with him through talismans, when developing a relationship with him, all that. But those are more general, significations. Essentially, these are more specific ones that I've channeled and kind of have came to me over the years of working with them. Because like I've said, I've worked with Algol for several years now. I've worked with most of the stars for several years now. I basically worked with 14 of the main fixed stars for um, uh, probably at least like 4 years each. Yeah. So I created 14 of the fixed star talismans. Um, um, Probably about, I created 14 of the 15 main ones, the Bohemian fixed stars, around like 4 or 5 years ago. I'd already completed all of those talismans except for the one. And that's just because the one I haven't completed yet, because I don't exactly want the effects of that talisman. Not necessarily yet. Anyway, maybe I'll go into that another time, but yeah. Um, anyway, these are more specific insights I've gained from working with him over the years, and the effects he has. Um, yeah, it'll help a person to be more confident and bold. It'll help people that work with them to be less petty and more magnanimous. It'll help a person to do what's right to a greater extent. It will help a person to act from a place of greater moral purity instead of acting from places of selfishness, insecurity, and jealousy. You know, it'll help you to act from places that are of higher emotions rather than lower ones over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but it'll happen, over time. If you put the time in and the work in, right, you'll gain, greater character and all that stuff, make better decisions and all that. He will empower you so you can do more good. But again, like I said, these the positive effects they has for people, they happen over time and with effort, work, right? It doesn't happen overnight. Don't expect it to, especially when you're working with a star, especially yeah. He won't attack a person just because you dislike them or for petty reasons. Um, he's not going to do that. But yeah, there's some demons that will, but fucking he won't. Yeah, that's not his thing. He's a god of judgment. He doesn't. He's not really about petty things. Um, he'll grant you greater success to your petitions and requests. With that success correlating somewhat with the benevolence and nobility of your request, right? Of the given request or petition. It will help you to have a more positive, proactive, and productive mind state. It'll help you to be more present and to be more, positive and less negative and more productive and all that stuff, right? It'll help you to just, be more efficient and all that in a good way. He'll protect your body and health. And regarding protection, one thing he does that that's one of his primary significations is that it's said that he basically reflects evil that's done to you. So basically, if bad actions are done to you by others, then basically what he does is he'll cause those actions to blow up in their faces, essentially. If you work with them and develop a relationship with them, he'll cause, if other people or other entities are trying to cause you harm and it's coming from an impure place, then it'll cause those actions essentially or attacks to blow up in their faces, so that you don't really get harmed, but the person who launches those attacks against you, they will, and this is an important point. If the person, how much it blows up in the person's face, it depends on how impure the place that they're coming from when they launch the attack, right? So, like, with that being said, as an example, like say a person, like accidentally, hits you in their car, right? And it's an accident, purely accidental, right? Then Algol is not going to punish them, right? Because it's like accidental, or a person, accidentally, drops a hammer from the 50-story building, right? And the hammer falls down and hits someone overhead and kills them, right? Algol is not going to, or injures them. It's not, Algol is not going to punish that person necessarily just because, they had an accident. But if the person, maybe if they weren't taking precautions that they should have, then maybe Algol would punish them to some extent. And then if the person did it maliciously, they maliciously dropped the hammer from the top of the building, right? It hurt someone. Then Algol would really fucking punish them, right? And that's basically how it works. Is Algol, he's not going to punish people necessarily just because they do something wrong that's accidental. But the more impurity that comes from it, and the more lack of accountability, for their own actions that the person takes, and the more of a negative act it was, the more the more, like I said, the more bad it is, the more of an impure place it's coming from, and the more of a the less accountability was taken, all that stuff. It factors into his decision on how much he's going to reflect it back at the person, right? So if the person, makes a mistake and, is sorry for it and, tries their best, to make amends, right? It's different than a person who does something maliciously because they want to see the other person's life get destroyed, right? Those are different. Those are two different places that the person's coming from. the person could be coming from when they launch an attack against a person, right? So it's like, Algol is going to take those factors into account and, specifically judge based on the person and where they're coming from, right? So, basically, essentially, what it boils down to is that if another entity attacks you and you're working with Algol, then he'll cause that to reflect back at the person, but he'll cause it to reflect back the most, like for that to blow up the biggest side there in their face. He'll cause it the most to happen to the people who have, whose intentions are the more impure, regarding the attack, right? The person who, um, he'll do that. He'll punish those ones the worst, and he'll cause their actions to blow up in their faces the worst. The ones who are coming from a place of, pettiness and places of negativity or evil, right? So essentially, like the more evil in intention the act is towards a person who works with him, then the more he'll cause their attack to damage the sender, to go back to the sender, right? That's how it works. He doesn't punish in a petty way. He punishes in a way that's fair. And like I said, if the attack is completely accidental, and the person is responsible and all that, it acts out of a place of responsibility and all that stuff, and high-mindedness, then he may not reflect back on the person. But if there's pettiness involved, or selfishness, things like that, low emotions involved, right? Then he'll cause the attack to basically blow up in the person's face. And the more from a place of selfishness and pettiness that the attack is launched from, then the more he'll cause it to blow up in the sender's face if you work with him. So essentially, like another signification that he does, essentially, is that one of the effects I notice, and that to some extent other people have noticed as well, I find. But this is a lot of these insights are basically mine. A few of them they correspond somewhat to other people's insights. But for instance, if you work with him and carry his talismans and develop a relationship with him, that stuff, right? He'll cause people with bad intentions for you to be uncomfortable even in your presence. It'll make them uncomfortable to even be around you. And that correlates to the degree of what their intentions are towards you. So if their intentions towards you are pure, then you'll make them, they'll be fine. They'll be comfortable, But the more impure their intentions are towards you, the more uncomfortable it'll make them. So if you have his talisman, and you have a good relationship with him as well, because it takes time to build a relationship with him beyond just creating a talisman once and never even talking to him again, or working with it, or using it, or holding it, stuff like that, right? Meditating on them, stuff like that, right? Invocations, perhaps. All these things help you develop a relationship with him, which is the point of creating a talisman to begin with. So yeah. If you have his talisman, if you have a relationship with him, it will cause people with bad intentions for you, with bad or evil or whatever you want to call it, intentions towards you, or selfish intentions towards you, negative intentions, whatever you want to call it. It'll cause them to feel uncomfortable to be around you. You'll cause them to try to avoid you. So it'll cause basically creepy people, to try to avoid you. They'll kind of like they'll feel it when they're around you. It'll make them uncomfortable, and they'll basically unconsciously, people will feel his presence. For a person who's working with him, they'll feel his presence, and the more impure, impurity, and the more bad intentions they have towards you, or the more selfish intentions they have towards you, and the more impure intentions they have towards you, the more uncomfortable it'll make them. Like it can even uh, you'll unnerve them. You know, creepy people or people with bad intentions towards you. It can even make their skin crawl. Like they'll feel it when they're around you. The worse their intentions are towards you, the more they feel it. The more uncomfortable it'll make them, the worse their intentions for you. The worse, you know, the more hatred they have for you, the more jealousy they have for you, the more contempt, whatever, of these things, these low emotions that they have for you, then the more uncomfortable you'll make them to be around you. If you have a good relationship with them, yeah. But like I said, he won't unnerve people if they have good intentions towards you. And the more pure a person's intentions are towards you, the um, the less uncomfortable it'll make them. So a person with pure intentions towards you, it won't make them uncomfortable. You know. Thus, he'll basically intimidate or repel the worst people the most, or the people who are have the worst intentions for you the most. You know. And basically, you know, the extent that he makes people uncomfortable, if you have a relationship with him, is it's in proportion, basically, towards the combination of the amount of negative intentions the person has towards you, as well as the amount of negativity or darkness within the person themselves, right? So it's basically based on those combination of those factors, right? That's why it's been told that his talismans, or working with him throughout history, repels evil or reflects evil back on the attackers. That's why, because that's what it says in the traditional sources, like the three books of occult philosophy and other traditional sources that talk about the stars and their significations, right? But those are the more, what I just said is the more, what I said in the past several minutes is more of the specific effects that has in action, right? Because reflecting evil and, reflecting, that's, that's a simplified way of putting it. What I said, it's basically extrapolates and it fills in the blanks on basically how it does it, and the principles behind it, how it operates, in protecting people. So basically, yeah, the more negative a person's intentions for you are, the more uncomfortable it'll make them. The more, the more, um, the more it'll, make their skin crawl and stuff like that, and unnerve them. And even I find that sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I can sense, like, see a person, they're a creepy person, and just I can sense it, and when I'm working with since working with Algol, I've noticed that some of those people, they'll just like cross the street when they see me. Those, like, they won't even want to get near me, which is good because it allows, it filters out the creepy ones that kind of I don't really want around me to begin with, right? And this is great, for people who want protection and stuff like that, because it allows Algol to basically um, to repel those people from you, which is good, especially if you're not as strong physically, right, and all that stuff, right? So for that reason, he's great for women, like yeah. And still cause the men with the worst intentions for you to basically not really want to associate with you, which is great. And that's great for men too. It's great for everyone, because it's kind of definitely there are women out there that don't have the best intentions towards men too, right? So it's like it's just it's no matter what gender you are, there are going to be people out there that don't have the best intentions for you, and all that stuff. So it's just he's good to work with for anyone, really. Yeah. Women have said that he's very protective. Yeah. Michael is good for that too. But Michael, he's a bit different than Algol. Michael's he's an archangel of protection, and but not necessarily in judgment the way that Algol is. They're a bit different, but they both protect you, so they're both good to work with if you're looking for that. But yeah. Um, Also, he'll help you. He'll protect you to some extent against like evil spirits and demons and stuff like that as well. He'll give you a bit of added protection regarding that. But like I said in the demons video, ultimate protection from demons and evil spirits and negative entities and all that stuff, it comes down to the choices that you make. And, the decisions that you make and who you are as a person, what's inside of you, what's inside your spirit, what's inside your heart, things like that. The amount of moral purity that you operate from. So and there are other factors as well. Like I said, watch the demons video if you want the full information on that I offered. But Algol will protect you to some extent against those type of negative entities, from their influence and persuasion and them being able to harm you and stuff. But like I said, the ultimate responsibility is in each of our hearts and souls, right? And our minds and the choices that we make, right? Our spirit and all that stuff, right? Rather than an external talisman or object or God or something like that, right? But he'll protect you to some extent, from that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, Algol, like I said, he's an archangel of judgment, and he punishes sometimes too. So like the thing is that Algol is gonna hold you accountable for your actions, whether you choose to work with him or not. So having a relationship with him doesn't give you a free pass to be a bad person or to do bad things, right? He will try to help you make better choices, and decisions in your own lives to make you better people, right? So he wants you to grow. He wants you to be a better person, essentially. Just because you have his protection, it doesn't necessarily mean that it gives you a free pass, to do shitty things, right? So it's like, it's, you still have to have, if you work with these entities, you still have to have a level of morality, and to strive to be a good person, to have conscientiousness, right? And to be, if, the reality is, and sometimes in life, there's situations when people, they'll push your back against a wall, you know, and the only way that you can get out of it is, just kind of, get out of it and, fight your way out, right? And that's just the way it is, But beyond that, and there's a certain amount of wisdom and understanding which situations where that's necessary, right? And what is necessary exactly to you get out of that situation, right? Because there's certain situations that people could put you in there pretty terrible, right? So it's like, sometimes you have to fight, and sometimes there's it's better to just walk away because it's just there's no point in fighting, right? And sometimes if you're defending yourself or something like that, right, it's like you try your best to to do so in a way that's accountable and that's responsible, right, and it's ethical, right, the best extent that you can, right, and like he'll give you protection to an extent, right, but you still want to make good choices yourself, right, and you want to do the best that you can, you don't want to make decisions based on selfishness or based on impurity or based off petty feelings, right? So if you endeavor to try to do that, to try to be your best self, and to and to you know avoid conflict when you can, and when you can't, to to fight back in um, the immoral way, then he'll then he'll respect that, right? Okay, he's been called by a lot of previous cultures an evil star. Yeah, that's like I said because he signifies as an omen, negative things that could happen to a person, right? In a natal chart, yeah. If they have certain aspects of their planets and or points and stuff in the natal chart with them, right? Actually, this is because he's a god of judgment, and since most people commit a lot of bad actions or evil actions, you know. Um, um, he's responsible partly for punishing them, right? So that's why more primitive people thought he was evil because they committed bad things, they did bad things, and there's like, no, I'm getting punished, or this bad thing has happened to me after I did all these bad things, right? So it's like it's a simplistic way of looking at it, but the reality is that like he. Um, those cultures believed him to be evil because in reality he was just bringing about justice through the bad things he would cause to happen in people's lives. He's a high god of or an archangel of karma and divine judgment, right? And and the reality is sometimes like sometimes in life you have to you know when another person is doing something that's wrong and it, sometimes you have to call them on it, and sometimes you just have to and when you do, sometimes it, sometimes the person won't even like to have to do it, but the other person will keep doing it if they don't. So the person, we have to sometimes stand up for ourselves, and sometimes we have to stand up for what's right. you know and if we see another person committing bad things and doing bad things consistently, then we have to call them on it. We have to bring justice to the situation, right? So like you know that's that's um that's just something, that's just a reality of life. So but what Algol does is Algol will try to take the pettiness out of that as much as possible, right? He wants to refine that out of it, and he wants to if a person has to defend themselves or has to call out another person when he's doing terrible things, or the person is doing terrible things, then um, Algol encourages the person to do it in a way that's that's as ethical as possible, right? But unfortunately, our world is just some people call it a dog eat dog world, and yeah, to be honest, fucking probably in a lot of cases they're right. You know, um, it's not it's not right. It's not right in general, and it's not the case all the time and with all people. It sure as hell isn't. You know, but in a lot of cases it certainly is, right? And that's unfortunate, but that's the thing with Algol is that with his judgment and his reflection of attacks and stuff like that, he basically makes it so that the world is a better place over time, so that people behave better, that people do better things, so that they do less bad towards other people, so that they you know they act with more purity and more benevolence and compassion towards others, right? Which is important because if we do that collectively more so, then there's less conflict, and there's less aggression, there's less bullshit, there's less people's lives being affected negatively, right? There's less there's less war, there's more peace if people they come from places of more sincerity, more honesty, more compassion, and more benevolence towards others, and more compassion, right? More understanding. you know? And if people have those operate under those characteristics more so in their actions and how they treat each other, then we get a better world, we get a better planet, we get less war, we get less conflict, we get less people's lives being destroyed, right? We get less people's um, you know you know we get less negativity, right? Isn't that what we want? So that's why that's one reason why I respect him a lot as an entity, because he tries to hold people accountable for their actions, which is important. And he doesn't do so in a negative or a petty way. He does so in a in a righteous way, right? Which is good. I respect that. Moreover, like if you work with him, then he'll fast track karma and divine judgment, which essentially means that like, karma, like it can operate pretty slowly sometimes. But Algol, what he does is that he'll fast track karma and judgment, basically. So if like people are harming you, stuff like that, he'll reflect their attacks back on them and cause in a faster way than what would normally happen. So that they can learn quicker, and so that the person who works from life is affected less, right? And essentially, one question that I've asked myself, from working with the stars and the planets and stuff like that, is, what, if he's helping these certain people that work with him, isn't that kind of unfair? And he's not really, and he's, giving these benefits to this person, this group of people that are working with him, and he's not giving the benefits to other people, right? That are had from his talismans, right? Or for getting a relationship with him. And the answer that I've come to with that is that essentially, like, there's a price to pay when you're working for them. And don't get me wrong, it's not a bad price. Actually, it's a good price. It's a great price, actually, when you work with them. It's and that price is that uh, he wants you to be a better person. He wants you to be your best self. That's what the stars want. That's what the archangels want, most of them. There are some there are archangels and they're pretty, they could be quite negative to an extent, right? But or they have a lot of darkness in them. But Algol isn't necessarily one of them. He's more of a, he's I wouldn't call him exactly, I wouldn't call him, I wouldn't say that he has no darkness in them, because even archangels have some darkness in them, right? Because if you look at the Bible, a lot of them, God would use them to basically kill people and stuff like that, right? So like, like there's darkness in basically any entity except like the highest God, right? Except Jehovah or Yahweh or Adonai or whatever you want to call him, right? Or God, So, but Algol is pretty, he's pretty light. He's pretty white, and yeah, he's definitely from the light. So essentially, like the price to working with him and the price of the benefits that he gives is he wants you to be a better person. He wants to operate from a place of more purity and more magnanimity. Like he says, he makes the person, it says in the traditional texts of the talismans, what they do, it makes the person more magnanimous. And like I said, it's not a word that's used very often nowadays, but what it essentially means, it makes the person less petty. It makes the person less prone to operate from feelings of jealousy or insecurity or anger or revenge or things like that, right? And so the cost to working with him is that he expects you, to be more accountable for yourself and to be a better person, and to try to treat other people better. To try to, and when a person who works with him is involved in conflict, to try to do their best to resolve the situation in a way that's fair, right? And yeah, so that's basically what like all the archangels and stars want, is when you work with them, is they want you to, or the main ones, the good ones anyway, you know, rather than I guess there are ones that are quite darker, more so into the spectrum, but the ones I work with, like the ones like mainly like like they're more so pretty much light. Um, So like, what they generally want is they want, a person who works with them, to, strive to be a better person, and to strive to, come from a place of, greater compassion and love and wisdom and stuff like that, and to, conduct themselves in the best way possible. He expects you to evolve, and to have a, desire to evolve, a desire to be a better person, um, um, meet your objectives in, as best way as you can, right? And if you work with them, and you expect that you can get all these benefits, and you can get benefit from them, and you're gonna just stay the same selfish person, or or a petty person or impure person that you already are, then he may not do much for you. But if you're striving to grow and to be better, and you're conscientious, and you work on yourself, and you examine yourself, you know, then he'll help you. You know, and which is good. And yeah, because the reality is in life, like a lot of people, they say, it's a dog eat dog world, right? A lot of people say that, and it's true a lot of the times. It's not true all the time, and it's not true for all people. But the reality is conflict is inherent in a lot of people. Conflict is inherent in everyone. For the most part, unless there's some ascended master. And if you look at it, even Jesus, he was supposed to be, he's believed to be like the most ascended entity ever, right? By some people, right? And look at him. He was in conflict. He was actually quite aggressive, actually, towards some of the religious institutions of his day. He'd go in their churches and he'd belittle them and say, hey, you're doing this wrong, blah blah blah. You shouldn't be doing that. Should be doing this. He was quite critical. He was actually quite assertive, and he could be even aggressive at times, Jesus. And but he was trying to do what was right, right? And even him, he got involved in conflict, right? He got they nailed him to a cross and killed him, right? So fucking, even the highest spiritual people, they can be involved in conflict, because that's just the nature of our world. Like, for instance, King David, he was a warrior. He fought Goliath and he won, and he fought a lot of other wars. He was he was a violent person. But he wasn't a bad but he wasn't a bad person either. He was just, that's just the way the world worked at that time. It was a very conflicted world at that time, and there's still a lot of conflict in the world. It's not as bad as it was back then, but there's still a lot of conflict in the world, right? So it's, the reality is, if you're a spiritual person, sometimes conflict is gonna come to you anyway. It just is what it is. It's not. It doesn't, just because you're more evolved or more conscious or more any of these things, more benevolent. It doesn't necessarily mean that conflict is going to avoid you. It's just you try to respond to it in the best way you can, right? And you try to do what's right. And you do what's right, and you try to be your best self, and and Algol will help you. Moreover, a lot of the prophets in the Bible were, so-called violent people, or people who are warriors or stuff like that, or people who are involved in conflict, because the world is a world of conflict. Like, we want to create more peace in this world. We want to create more harmony. We want less conflict, right? But the reality is, until that happens, it's and sometimes conflict will just come to a person. Sometimes they won't. A lot of the times, when conflict comes to a person, they won't even ask for it. They won't even want it, but the other side will fucking throw it at them, and force them into it, or put them back into the wall, hold a gun to their head, or knife to their throat. It's just the way it is. That's the way the world works. In those situations, you just have to do the best you can, to fight your way out, right? And just and to do what's right. And if the other person's doing something wrong and you know it, and then to call them on it, right? And but beyond that, that's really all I have to say. But yeah, I'll be telling you how to make an Algol talisman for, it's going to be approximately 5 a.m. on Tuesday of this week. So I'll put that in the next video. and I'll be doing that probably in a few minutes here actually, because it won't take me long to explain how to do it, because I'm not going to explain specifically the astrology of it, because if I did, it would take me like it'd take me fucking days to do it, because I'd have to start at the beginning and all that, and Jesus Christ, I'm not going to do that. I have an election time window that you can create it under, and I'll tell you basically the materials that you're going to need, and how to do it, and the time window that you have. It'll be approximately around 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so. And yeah, so if you're interested in starting to have a relationship with him, and then you may want to check that out. So yeah, signing off, and hopefully you learned something from this video, and good luck becoming better people. Thanks.